made by Senator West, and there was a second by Representative Killian. Timoney, all members do so by saying aye. All those opposed, minutes pass. We have a very robust agenda for today, and the first thing on the agenda is something that's not new to the Kentucky Legislature, is Save the Children. And I would like to ask for those that are presenting this morning to make their way to the table. Senator Stivers, I'm going to turn the floor over to you, sir, for the introductions this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I've said this on quite a few occasions that I'm one of the historians or older people here, and I'm actually looking in the room, and I don't think there's a single person in the room that has actually served longer in either chamber than I have. I think Senator Neal is the only person in the Senate that has served longer than I have. But with that, I want to give this perspective. Mark Shriver is here with me, with Madison, who is a young student from the Whitley County school system. As Chairman Huff said, you know, it's been a great experience. You meet a lot of people. Well, back in 2006, 5? It's way back there. As you get this old, you forget how many years ago it's been. I had a unique opportunity to hear about Save the Children and what they were going to do or try to do. And I want to tell you about the seriousness of this. Since that period of time, I've gotten to know Mark Shriver very well. And I think it's kind of unique, and one of the experiences that you have is that most people probably consider me pretty staunch Republican. Knowing who Mark is and his family, I think they would probably be considered pretty staunch Democrats. But this is an area that we got together on years ago, that there was no difference of opinion about how this group could help in the educational realm by doing supplemental services. My first meeting and discussion was actually on a weekend with Mark, after I was vehemently opposed to them getting any funding in the state because of a person that they were going to employ that I'd had a very serious problem with. They were getting a $200,000 grant and using it in my home county, and not a single elected official knew who they were. And they had been receiving this $200,000 for years, and were sending about 3/4 or $150,000 of it back, in essence only paying themselves a salary to perform the function of ABE, Adult Basic Education, and GED programs that neither the mayor, the judge, the state representative, the state senator, nor the superintendent of education knew about. There was another instance, and I said, if this is the group that Save the Children is, hiring people like this, I'm adamantly opposed. I got a call from Mark that weekend, having never met him before, asking me what the problem was. I explained it. That person was no longer in their employ by Monday. They're serious about this. They think education is a real opportunity, and they have some great evidence-based outcomes that have worked. And they are going to tell you of some statistics that they have seen during the pandemic and their performance level of how they have helped in various counties that are located. And then the last thing before Mark and Madison take over, because you didn't want to listen to me, but I wanted to give you all historical perspective. For every dollar that we put up as the state legislature, they generally match it with $10 to $12 of their own that they do in private fundraising. As I've said over this period of time, it's been a wonderful experience to get to know Mark. He's been with me. He's traveled with me. When I'm in D.C., we have lunch or dinner together to talk about educational issues, and it has been a true pleasure to have gotten to know Mark and the whole Save the Children group and see what they have done in the state of Kentucky. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, introduce to you Mark Shriver, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for Save the Children Foundation. Mark.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Senator Stivers.
Hit your button.
Hit the button. Thank you very much, Senator Stivers, for those very kind words. Madam Chair, Chair Weiss, Chair Huff, thank you very much. Members of the committee, thank you for inviting us to say a few words, answer a few questions. I'm joined by Alyssa Taylor, who runs our programs in Kentucky. I was a member of the legislature way back when, and Heather Stewart is joining us from Whitley County as well. I know how precious this time is, so thank you very much for having me here. I do just want to make one quick correction from Senator Stivers. We match the money that comes from the state legislature 14-1. It's actually not 10 or 12, it's $14 matched in here. And we do focus, as the senator said, on early childhood education and to really focus in on that. And when I came on board some 17, 18 years ago, we did refocus it because when I was in the legislature in Maryland, we understood the importance of investing early and the brain growth in those first 5 years of life up through and including third grade. If a kid is not reading at grade level by the end of third grade, that child in many cases is going to struggle through elementary school, high school, and beyond. So it's a huge investment. Senator Stivers encouraged us to be focused. We did. And we also fired our evaluation company because they were not producing data that we could produce to legislatures, to governors, secretaries of education across the country that showed whether the monies that you all are investing really make a difference in children's lives, whether kids were actually doing better academically rather than just getting services. SAVE was started in Kentucky in 1932 in Harlan County, really at the height of the Depression, precursor to the federal lunch program. We now are doing both food, which Alyssa will walk you through, and early childhood education services as well. And we're so proud to be in 14 counties, employing almost 500 Kentuckians, not only in rural Kentucky, but in Berea and in Lexington as well. We've moved a lot of our functions from Save the Children down in Connecticut to here in Kentucky because this really is our, if you will, home away from home. And Alyssa will go through some of those details. I'm joined, as the senator said, by Madison, who is a sixth grader at Whitley Intermediate, right? And she's going to put her microphone on. And she's going to tell us a little bit about the programs, because I can tell you about them, but it's kind of boring. So you participated in the in-school and after-school programs that we run for when you were in third grade, right?
Yes.
And did you like them?
Yeah.
Okay, well, now, I don't know whether that's the first time we've ever exaggerated in the Frankfurt legislature. Did you really like them, or are you just saying that because Heather told you to say it?
I liked them.
You did? Mm-hmm. Okay. And what do you like? You like so we do math and reading, right?
Yes.
And do you like one more than the other?
Yes. I like math better.
You like math better than reading?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. I can't stand math, right? So did it happen during the school day? You want to tell the folks, all of whom are very nice, what kind of a typical day look like? Did you go during the school day and then after school?
Yeah, I would go during the school day. I would get pulled out of class to go read a book and then take a test on it, and then I'd go back to class, and then I'd go after school.
So when you were actually reading the book and taking the test, that's to see if you got it, and then did you take the test on a computer?
Yeah.
And does the score you get the score right away?
Yeah.
And you did okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like hundreds, or what happened?
Hundreds or 80s.
Right. Okay, well, I didn't get a lot of hundreds when I was in sixth grade, so that's pretty good, right? And then, so we're dealing with in Whitley County and in the other 13 counties we work in, right, Alyssa, is students that are behind in first, second, or third grade. So you were a little bit behind, but by reading those books during the school day, and then after school too, you're reading books. Walk everybody through what happens after school.
You go in the cafeteria, you would get a snack, and then you'd wait for the teachers, and then they'd go and you'd read a book, take a test on it, and then you'd go do activities and stuff.
And the activities are physical games?
Yeah.
Do you like any of those?
Yeah.
So those have, and the snacks, good for you snacks, or good snacks?
Good for you snacks.
Oh. Did you like those or not really?
Not really.
No, okay. So what we're trying to focus in on giving kids healthy food, like carrots, mm-hmm. broccoli. They can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay. So we were running we run those programs during the school day to pull kids out that are struggling on school day, and they're tested, as you'll hear from Melissa, at the beginning of the school year, so you know exactly what level of book you're reading at, right?
Yeah.
So some of your friends might be reading different books than you were.
Like different levels.
And you could tell that by your test, is that right?
Yeah.
And then you would you, when you got better and better, you'd read different books that are more challenging?
Mm-hmm.
And you take the quizzes?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So we were running those programs during the school day. And were you in the summer program as well?
Yeah.
And what happens? Tell them a little bit about what happens in the summertime.
In the summer, you just do fun stuff, and then you take tests.
Do you like taking tests in the middle of the summer?
No.
No, okay. But what we're talking about is education, right?
Yeah.
And that is part of what we're trying to make it fun. So there are different ways. So when you did the independent reading, and then would you play games that are literacy games?
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit to the senators and representatives.
There's like a lot of different games that you can go and play, like that help with like spelling or reading or math. There's just a lot of different ones.
What, do you have one example of that are fun? I mean, would they put cards up and have you spelled words? And
Yeah, there's like this one, it's spellingcity.com, and there's just like a bunch of different games that help you like spell different words and practice for like your spelling test.
And how did you do? Did you do better with grades?
Yeah.
As a result?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to do, members of the legislature, is pull kids out during the school day with obviously a relationship with the school, which Alyssa will walk you through. Then after school and in the summertime, supplementing that education work. And that happened during COVID in unique and different ways. Mm-hmm. It happened obviously before COVID, and it's happening in those 14 counties. And the results are really, really exciting. Chair Wise and Chair Huff, as Alyssa will walk you through, are profoundly positive despite COVID. And it's because of the work of Heather that students like Madison are getting these services really all year long, both in the school year but also in the summer as well. Alyssa, do you want to walk? Thank you very much. Is there anything that we missed or that you wanted to say?
No.
Was I very good?
Mm-hmm.
I was? Okay, thank you. Nothing else? Okay, she's done. You're on, Alyssa. Tell us a little bit about what SAVE does and the results, please.
Sure. I want to thank you all for your time. I'm from Estill County, born and raised. Appreciate the work that we get to do in rural. I feel very honored to work for Save the Children and give back to these small communities like I grew up in. So at Save the Children, we work with 71 schools across 14 counties, and we are a true partner to the school district. So what we do at the beginning of the year, there's testing. So we identify children that don't qualify for other programs, but that may not be up to grade level. So we're most successful with students who are behind, but don't qualify for any other interventions that are offered within the school. So we offer in-school and after-school programs. Early childhood, we work prenatal through 5th grade with children to focus on math and reading proficiency. So the coordinators that are hired to work in the school districts are employees of the district. So they're local community members who are engaged with the schools. They know the communities, they know the families. And we provide these additional resources, training, and materials to help these children get up to grade level so that they don't continue to fall behind. We know that they really need to be reading at grade level by 3rd grade to continue on a successful trajectory. So I'll talk a little bit about the programs. They are evidence-based components, read aloud, guided independent reading, and Heather can talk a little bit more about those as well. But throughout the pandemic, we realized we needed to adapt. And so that's what we did. We know that many of the school doors were closed. They were offering virtual classrooms. And so what we focused on was growth, creativity, and continued outreach. So creativity was how do we get resources into the hands of kids and families. We know that parents were also serving in the role as teacher during that time, and so we provided support. We called them on the phone. We worked with the school district to identify families who needed some additional help, as well as the participants in our program, and we just had continued outreach. We offered Zoom programs, so one-on-one and small group read-alouds with children to make sure that they were continuing to read books throughout the day. The test that Madison spoke about may not be the favorite part, but it helped us to gauge comprehension. So were they really taking in and understanding what they were reading? And we saw that they were. So one of the things we're most proud of during the pandemic is children that participated in our programs, in Save the Children programs, saw growth equivalent to 2 additional months of school. Children that did not participate in our programs did not achieve that same level of growth. So that is something I'm really proud of. It shows that the programs work, it shows that the intervention was necessary, and it shows that it helped.
If I could just interrupt, I'm sorry. When I was in the legislature, and I'm sure it happens to each one of you, people come in and ask for more money all day long. And when we hired, when I first came on board, we fired the evaluation company because the data didn't show whether the work was actually, the work that Senator Stivers and others talked about, was actually having an impact on kids. And what Alyssa just said is that kids during the pandemic, I'm just going to reemphasize it, grew almost the equivalent of a normal school year plus 2 additional months. Okay, so there wasn't a loss, there was actually a gain. What we had done prior to the pandemic is average roughly 7 months of additional academic growth over the regular school year, right? It dropped down from 7 months of additional growth down to 2 months, but they didn't slide backwards. And that is not true, as you'll hear from Heather, of students who didn't participate in the program. And that is really critical. It is actually having an impact, and I just want to, sorry to cut you off there, but it's just to reemphasize that because, you know, I flew down from Washington. This is really exciting stuff. I mean, the schools are struggling. Our kids are struggling in schools in Maryland, in our home. This is through her creativity and the staff on the ground, all of whom are from Kentucky, all of whom are locally hired, all of them who are trained by Save the Children and evaluated independently. That is actually having an impact. So I'm like, wow, that's really exciting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's great. And creativity was one of the way the coordinators on the ground achieved that. So working with the school district, we'd host drive-through events. So we've received donated materials, and this is stuff that kids want. Play-Doh, toys, games, books. And we offered those to the communities. We broadcast on local radio stations, one calls from the school districts. And with that, we would give them bags of educational activities as well. So books, learning materials, daily activity sheets, et cetera. So making sure that they were incentivizing families to get out and receive them. Also utilizing mobile units and meal deliveries to make sure that these materials got into the hands of families. We incentivize children to complete their daily activity sheets by offering rewards for those that completed for each week. Their name was entered into a drawing for a prize. Just continuing to think outside the box and working weekly with our school districts to see how many kids were showing up, how many were you hearing back from, who has fallen off the radar, and making those phone calls and driving out to homes to make sure that they were being served. So now I'd like to introduce you to Heather Stewart. Heather is a district instructional coach for Whitley County School District. She's well-versed in all things programmatic. She also supports the Save the Children programs. And she's going to talk a little bit about what she's seen in Whitley County specifically with our programs.
Thank you, Alyssa. And like we said, I've actually taught with Ms. Huff in summer programs, doing writing portfolios. I've worked a lot in the regular classroom setting, and I've been an instructional coach now for about 15 years with Whitley County Schools. And I was blessed to be able to work as a tutor in the program when they first brought it into Whitley County. And then since then, I've been the supervisor for all of our programming. And I cannot tell you the difference that Save the Children makes in our district and in all the districts that they work with on an absolutely daily basis throughout the entire year. Like she said, they work in our community, Save the Children does, every day with birth age, actually when they're pregnant. We start, Save the Children starts serving families, and we start targeting those girls who may struggle and they want to help their children, but they don't know how to teach their children. So Save the Children trains people in our schools. We actually have about 35 Whitley Countyans employed through the funds that Save the Children provides in Whitley County, full-time staff just in our school district alone. They work with those families. They go into their homes. They teach them. Then they do that program up to 3 years for development, and we all know most of the child's brain is developed by the age of 3. But there was a gap. We saw that they weren't getting preschool. Save the Children listened to us, and now they provide kindergarten readiness. Because a lot of our parents don't know what kindergarten is and what they need. Save the Children provides that for us. They do amazing activities, weekly things. They did the drop-offs, just like she was talking about. Then we also have in-school reading, and now thank you, Save the Children. We recently added math. Senator Stivers, we appreciate that. Save the Children funds all that. It's an amazing math program that we are now doing with that's hands-on, fun. Getting those kids' brains that are behind, you have to get kids who are behind to love it. That's the only way you can ever teach them. If they don't love something, if they can't visualize it, if they can't work with it, they won't learn. Save the Children understands that. They called us during the pandemic literally every week and would say, what do you want now? What do you need now? They listen to us. And I don't know how many of you have ever worked with grants or federal grants. That's not what happens. They tell you what they want you to do, and you have to do it. That's not what Save the Children does for us. Save the Children ask us what we need, and they help us fix that need in our district. Our children live in an area that did not have internet. They didn't have cell phone service. Save the Children helped us provide transportation for the food, for the resources, the packets, and handed those out. I'm going to get emotional because our kids live in areas, they don't have this, they don't see this. Save the Children and our superintendent worked so that families were provided food every day. Kids would wait hours to come to get the food for 2 days and the activities that Save the Children sent them. This was a time they weren't seeing anybody else because they don't have internet, they don't have cell phone, they don't have anybody that cares. But during the pandemic, they saw that Save the Children cared about them and Whitley County Schools cared about them. And now that we're back in session, Save the Children is continuing to support us and all the counties, however we need it, so that those kids who are behind, they aren't going to be behind anymore. They're going to catch up. So I am so thankful for the time that you've given us, but I also want you to really think about what they can do for our schools. And if you've ever worked in a school, you know how hard it is. If you've ever had a child go to school, you know how hard it is. So I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to working with you all more.
Thank you. That's beautiful. We're happy to take any questions. I'm sure I talked too long. I just want to say one last thing. When Heather talks about the importance of math, that was feedback. We were focused really heavily on literacy, and we heard from Senator Stivers and from other folks across the country and across Kentucky about the importance of doing math. So we broadened the programs. And I will say, Senator Stivers made reference to the fact that he's a Republican and I'm a Democrat. You know, this program, our funding first came in through Governor Fletcher. And it has gone through Governor Beshear, through Governor Bevin, through Governor Beshear now, really because of the support of the legislature. It has been bipartisan. You know, we are united in the fact that we are trying to help kids get up to grade level. And that cuts across all party lines, and the importance of the best ROI for, we think, public investment is in early childhood education. And that's what Save the Children does.
Thank you all so much
Chair.
for the testimony. We have a number of members that have signed up for comments or questions. Members, I just ask that you please keep your questions direct. We still have two other big agenda items for today. First up is Co-Chair Huff.
Thank you, Co-Chair Wise. I just want to welcome Madison Lunsford. I've known Madison most of her life, and she's a fine young lady. I want to speak to the passion and effectiveness of Save the Children. And as I said, I've worked with Heather, but in this position I hold now, I've been invited to their trainings and to speak with their group. And the thing I love about it is they allow their data to guide their instruction, and then the data drives the theory that they put into practice. And they've worked tirelessly to provide a print-rich environment for our district to the younger children that would never have this opportunity, as well as nutrition. So I just can't say enough about the effectiveness and the passion that all of these people have working to give hope and increasing the content of what these children are receiving. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Bojanowski.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So my first comment is for Madison. Madison, I'm a special education elementary teacher, and I have a subscription of Spelling City, and so my kids get to do the same thing that you're doing. Just to iterate about the importance of early childhood education. If you have any doubts, you need to read James Heckman. He's a Nobel Prize winning economist, and the number $1 that we can spend in public education would be for early childhood. I'm trying to go really fast, Senator Wise. I've been doing a lot of research on reading pedagogy, and if I could, I'd like to sit down with someone from the group to really get in the weeds on what you're doing for teaching reading, if that would be possible. And then finally, my question is, did you, when you assess the progress, did you control for the fact that these students were getting a one-on-one intervention versus the other children not having a pull-out time or a one-on-one time? Some of the research I'm reading shows that there are benefits from a program, but how can you take out the benefits of what they're actually doing as opposed to the additional time that they may be getting one-on-one attention?
Thank you for your questions and your support. And I would be happy to meet with you and talk more about this. We're always wanting to learn more and talk about our component approaches. We did consider that in a lot of the schools where we work during the pandemic. We did classroom push-ins. When that was happening, it helped the teacher. We worked with the school to figure out what would be the best approach when small group sessions weren't possible. So in some cases, there weren't that one-on-one. So it really was a classroom push-in, and we saw the same growth.
And thank you for the reference to Dr. Heckman, who's from a Nobel Prize-winning economist from the University of Chicago, which is not a flaming liberal organization. And he looked at that, and the data is very strong that it's the best public investment in high-quality early childhood education. And that, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, is the key. It's got to be high quality. It's got to be, Chairman Huff, as you said, driven by the data. And it's got to be driven by evidence-based, as both Senator Stivers and Alyssa just spoke about. It's got to be based on evidence that works.
Thank you. Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all of you being here today. Madison, I realize it was a great sacrifice not being in school today to be with us, but we appreciate you sharing with us about your experience in these programs. And I'll just have a couple of brief questions, if I could, Mr. Chair. In these programs, are they more intervention-based, or is there a component of Tier 1 instruction involved in your programs?
They're mostly intervention-based, but we are expanding more into the Tier 1 instruction by providing technical assistance and TA training and technical assistance to school-wide staff as well. So working with them, we're always partnering with the school district. We want to be a true partner to identify what works best. And some of these components and approaches will work for whole classrooms.
Okay. And one more brief question, Mr. Chair. And I know you primarily work in the rural communities, but Kentucky, like a lot of other states, is very diverse. We have a lot of issues in our urban settings with families economically depressed. We're seeing that's where a lot of the gaps are. Are you all looking at the possibility of working in more urban settings? And the type of programs you do now, do you feel like they could be replicated and be successful in what I would call an urban setting?
Well, we look at it. We really look at the niche that is the most underserved in America traditionally, and that has been rural America, not just rural Kentucky, but in the other states where we work as well. There isn't the civic infrastructure of, food banks, boys and girls clubs, libraries, right? A lot of the, civic infrastructure isn't there. So we tried to stay focused on that and not be all things to all people. We have experimented in a couple of urban settings. Those have gone well. But again, I don't know, Alyssa, you can disagree with me, but, so we're looking. There's plenty of need in rural Kentucky, which we're always happy to talk about spending more of your money, which we can do and do well. And if we don't do well, you should fire us. That's what we say everywhere we go, is if we're doing well, we want to grow. And if we aren't doing a strong ROI for you in the places where your schools are struggling the most and where students are struggling because we're all under pressure to meet, average growth in education, if we're not doing a good job, you should take our money. But if we're doing a good job, we would like to grow.
Senator Southworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know if our guests can speak, or this might be to President Stivers a little bit, all the programs that I've heard about that kind of come together to make Save the Children, the names that I know a lot of these similar things by are Friskies, and we were talking about food. We're talking about reading interventions. Read to Achieve comes to mind. The HANDS program, talking about trying to target mothers even pre-birth. And so I want to get clarification. Is this Save the Children work alongside those other programs? Are you a contractor for providing those program services, or how does all that connect?
So we'll work alongside those other programs. We're not a contractor providing those direct services. So again, once I say we're a partner to the district, I'm familiar with all of those organizations and programs, and we work with them. So selecting students and that are participants for our programs are participants that don't fit in with the targeted approach for those other programs that are offered. So we don't want to duplicate what's already being done. We want to offer a side-by-side approach to make sure no children fall behind.
Typically, Senator, I also oversee the RTA grants in our district, and so my job is to make sure that every child that can fit into either grant that we have, we are able to service more children that way. Because both of those are very limited, as you're well aware of the RTA. It's very minimal of the number that the one person could serve. So what I do is we make sure that the kids who can fall under the RTA guidelines, they get service. The kids who fall in the Save the Children, they get service. So more of our students can be serviced.
Senator Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and very good question. You know, when this applied, I've actually been out with Mark looking at a young lady who needed various types of help but didn't qualify in certain areas, but working with the family resource centers, they had identified this young student, and we went to the home where the father was working in the timber, not making a lot of money, mother trying to take care of the child but didn't qualify for various things. And through Save the Children, I don't know if you remember that day, the young lady started singing because of some of the materials you gave to them. This mother was working with the child who was a student in the Clay County system on various reading functions, math functions, and fine and gross motor skills. And they would rotate the materials. I can't remember how long. I think it was about on a month-long basis. So the child would continue to progress. But these are not ingrained in the systems. These are all supplements to everything that Representative Southworth has discussed.
And we're happy to go through that in more detail because that's a really important question. And when we've expanded to other states, when we expanded to West Virginia, Governor Manchin, now Senator Manchin, Governor Manchin actually flew down to see the programs because he was very concerned about redundancy and overlap and didn't want to be spending precious dollars, taxpayer money, on redundancy. And we can walk through that offline with you or any members of the committee because we do not do redundancy and we provide services to a distinct niche, as Senator Stivers just said.
Excellent. Thank you. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you use a specific reading list, the books that the students go through? Is there a specific list that you follow?
Well, they're suggested books, but the thing that is so great about the GIRP that Madison would go through, Guided Independent Reading Practice, the students select the books that they want.
Hi, we've checked out at 10, but I'm a state senator and I'm on a Zoom call with the governor in Frankfurt. So we were That's why I'm just sitting here waiting.
Thank you. And a side of fries with that as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Got to hit the mute button always, right? Right.
Yeah. So the students get to select the books that they want based on their level, and we also use different things that Renaissance Place. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. They tell us what the books are that most kids are liking. And so those are the books that we try to select. Save the Children also funds a lot of our library books that our libraries would not be able to have. They also help fund in-home libraries for those children who don't have the money to purchase books.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senator West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your success, especially during COVID. My question is specifically for Mrs. Stewart. You mentioned the coaching model, and you mentioned that you were coaching parents, and your people were coaching parents. Does that apply? Were you doing any coaching for your teachers as well?
Yes.
Or so were you doing both? Could you comment on that?
Yes, I'm a district instructional coach. So I actually work birth to high school, but everybody knows that my area of emphasis is the elementary area, particularly the K through 3. But Save the Children will provide trainings for their staff. Then they also allow our staff to attend those trainings, and then we can train the rest of the staff based on what they've paid for things for us and those kind of things. And now with the families, what we're trying to teach the families is to be their own teacher. Like a lot of our families don't feel secure in knowing what the kids are supposed to know. So they help tell those parents what are those developmental milestones and what are the things that they should be doing at 3 months? What should they be doing at 5 months? They come into the home and they demonstrate it. They'll get on the floor with them. They'll show those parents. They teach the parents so then the parent can replicate with the child, and then they can bond doing those fun activities, things that you have around the house. That's the thing that's wonderful about the early steps is we're wanting the parents to become that great teacher.
So just a quick follow-up. So you're an instruction. You mentioned an instructional coach. You're an instructional coach with Save the Children, correct?
No, I am an instructional coach for Whitley County Schools.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I oversee the Save the Children programming.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It's a little complicated. It varies from state to state, and people, it gets confusing at times about because some of the greatest entrepreneurs are in your school system, and they're cobbling together resources in order to pay for the services. And we do, as Alyssa said, our staff on the ground actually works for the county school system, right? But they are paid for by Save the Children. So they think they work for Save the Children. They do, but they are paid by the school system, even though we give the school system the money to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Thank you.
Our last question for the panel, Senator Meredith.
Thank you, Chairman Wise. Again, congratulations on a great program. I wish we could fund more things that had a 14-to-1 return on investment. This question is for Ms. Taylor. You said on 2 or 3 occasions that you're providing services to kids who otherwise wouldn't qualify for other services, and I'm confused by that a little bit. Could you elaborate on that eligibility portion? And 'cause I guess what I'm struggling with is you say there's no redundancy, but it looks like there's redundancy is if the services are there, but kids don't qualify for whatever reason. So could you elaborate on that qualification issue?
Yes, I can, Senator, and thank you. And I'll also let Heather weigh in on this as well, since she sees this and puts this into practice in Whitley County. But we focus on children who we really want to go from novice to proficiency. So children who aren't reading at grade level, but aren't the farthest behind that would qualify for interventions that the school district offers. So it's important for them to get up to grade level, but there aren't always the resources in the district to provide this service to all children. And I'll let Heather talk a bit about how they put that into practice.
Yeah, like she's saying, some of our kids will not qualify for special education services. So we typically have quite a huge number of students who come in below grade level because of the home life. I'm just going to be honest with you. Where we live, they don't have opportunities like you all have here in Frankfort. So we have probably a larger population of students who do not qualify for special ed services because they're not that low, but they're not up on grade level. The RTA grant can only service 30 students a day. We have way more than that when we service K through 12 or K through 6 in our schools. So Save the Children is able, we service typically 90 students a day with Save the Children, with the staff that we have with Save the Children, just in school. Then after school, we target about 50. We usually have an average daily attendance about 35, and after school's open to anybody. So that's how we're able to get more of our students served than with other programs, because we don't have anything else that we can serve that in the intervention.
So grade level is the baseline, is that what you're saying?
Below grade.
Below grade level.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is there any other qualification criteria that you look at?
Well, go ahead. Okay. We take the STAR test, we take the MAP test, and then teacher recommendation.
So those are all pre-tests to see where the kids are functioning academically, and if they are substantially behind, usually 2 years behind, which is a big deal in first grade, right? Then in the case of Madison, you can actually know as an example, that if she's in the 2nd grade but reading on the 1st grade 8th month, which is different than Betty, who's her best friend, who's reading on the 1st grade 6th month, they're reading different books, and they're coded representative so that the book is geared towards the specific child, and it's all individualized. So these kids are behind academically. In most cases, as economist Heckman has pointed out, kids that are that far behind, if they don't have high quality care or high quality early education, are not going to get to be at reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. So there are, almost every school we work in is 100%, 95% farm free and reduced meals. So there are poor communities, and the school identifies the kids that are struggling the most. And we go into the counties that are struggling the most academically, but with huge opportunities for growth, which is what we've done in Kentucky, which is really exciting.
So you're filling a gap that's not otherwise addressed.
Yeah.
That's correct, because there's a lack of resources to do that in these communities.
And capacity. So it's a resource and capacity issue. And with Save the Children and the private fundraising, we're able to bring more resources on top of what the state provides us to help schools and their children catch up.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Can't thank you all enough for their excellent presentation today from all different aspects. Thanks for the job each and every one of you are doing. Madison, thank you for being here. You probably had a great learning experience. We're happy to provide a note back to your school principal, your teachers, if you need that. But excellent job today. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is an item that has been in the news quite a bit lately on different aspects, and that is on name, image, and likeness. The NIL is commonly referred to. We have a whole host of people that will be presenting on this. So if the following could make their way to some form around the table, that would be great. Ms. Angela Curry, General Counsel and Vice President for Legal Affairs, University of Louisville. Matt Banker, Associate Athletic Director, University of Louisville. Shannon Ricketts, Assistant Vice President, Government Relations, University of Louisville. Bart Harden, Director of Government Relations, University of Kentucky. William Throw, General Counsel, University of Kentucky. Rachel Baker, Assistant Associate Athletics Director for Compliance, University of Kentucky. And lastly, Matt Rohn, Vice President, Director of Athletics at Eastern Kentucky University. Like I said, we may not be able to fit everyone there at the table, but if there's a way that you all could somewhat circle around the table, that would be great. And looking directly in front of me is my good friend Bart Harden. And Bart, I will allow you to go first, and however you wish to the presentation to go from there, it's up to you, friend.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Wise, Chairman Huff, and members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. For the record, I'm Bart Harden. I'm the Director of Government Relations. I think what we're going to do, I'm going to make a few opening comments, and Shannon is, and then we're going to turn it over to our 4 campus experts we have with us.
Sounds great.
It's our pleasure to be here to jointly work on this and briefly discuss name, image, and likeness, or NIL as we refer to it. First, I want to thank you, Chairman Wise, Leader Morgan McGarvey, President Stivers, House Speaker Osborne. We've been working with this for a while, and you all have given us the space to try and navigate this as we enter into a new world for college athletics. Ideally, this is an issue that probably would be addressed by Congress so that all 50 states are playing by the same set of rules. At least up until this point, that's not happened. And as you know, we are operating currently under an executive order under the permission of that order, and we want to thank the governor for doing that and giving us the ability back in the summer to move ahead with some semblance of NIL. As I said, we've discussed this issue with you and others for the better part of 3 years, and you've been very patient with us and given the opportunity for us to provide you with a draft piece of legislation that was primarily developed with the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky. I will say it's been shared with all the comprehensive universities as well. I think with that, I'm going to let Shannon say a couple words, and then we're going to punt to our technical folks.
Yes. I'm Shannon Rickett. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Government Relations at the University of Louisville. Chair Wise, Chair Huff, and members of the committee, thank you for having us here today. I want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to work on this important piece of legislation that will affect our universities and our student athletes. And I would like to introduce Angela Curry, our General Counsel at the University of Louisville and VP of Legal Affairs, and Matt Banker, our Associate Athletic Director, to talk about the draft bill and answer any questions you all have.
Chairman Wise, I will say with the University of Kentucky, I have our General Counsel, Bill Throw, and our Associate Athletics Director for Compliance, Rachel Baker. And at your direction, we're going to try to keep this at a pretty much a 30,000-foot level and answer what questions that this committee might have. So with that, I'm going to step away from the table and let Bill and Rachel come up. Sorry about that.
Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you all.
Chairman Wise, Chair of Staff. Let me make sure my microphone's on. Chair Huff, committee members, first of all, it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm a native of Lexington, Kentucky, and it's been a pleasure to not only represent the University of Louisville, but also work with my colleague, Bill Throw from the University of Kentucky. So the legislation that you have before you seeks to accomplish three main goals. First, it gives to student athletes the ability to earn compensation on their name, image, and likeness. Second, it gives the Commonwealth's post-secondary institutions the ability to place reasonable restrictions on that ability. And then third, it gives the Commonwealth's institutions the immunity that we need to navigate this landscape. I'm going to jump right in. Section 100 is really just the definition section. It lifts many of the definitions that are already present in the executive order that we've been operating under since last summer.
Members, real quickly, we do not have any piece of legislation in front of you, so what's being discussed is draft legislation presented by the university. So just to make you aware, not to be flipping through your folders and binders looking for any piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, merely proposed. Very much draft. The definition section also adds definitions from the existing KRS regulations as they relate to athlete agents. So they provide clear, common sense definitions for name, image, and likeness, and of course we can answer any questions that you might have. Section 200 really gets to the main thrust of the legislation. It gives the student athletes at post-secondary institutions in the Commonwealth the ability to be compensated for name, image, and likeness. It requires that the compensation be equal to market value, and it carves out some common sense definition. It eliminates scholarships from the definition of compensation. It protects them in the event that they have their athletic or their eligibility jeopardized by name, image, and likeness compensation. It makes sure that they have protection for that. And then it also allows institutions to consider, though, the compensation that they have if there are any need-based compensation or need-based scholarships or awards. I'm going to move to Section 300 and turn it over now to Bill. This allows the institutions to place reasonable restrictions on the ability to earn compensation. It requires that we put that in writing and that it apply to all student athletes. And Bill, I just ask you to walk through some of the specific examples.
Thank you, Angela, and thanks to everyone on the committee for giving us the opportunity to speak with you.
Microphone, thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Angela, and thank you to everyone on the committee for giving us the opportunity to talk with you and to present our views about proposed legislation concerning NIL. As Angela said, one of the key things for the universities is we have to have the flexibility to impose reasonable restrictions. And rather than delineating all the restrictions that we thought would be reasonable and then perhaps having to come back every year to add additional restrictions or to tweak restrictions, we propose just simply saying that universities may adopt whatever restrictions that they believe are reasonable as long as they are in writing. However, it's important to remember what some of those restrictions that we would regard as reasonable would be. One is simply disclosing the existence of a name, image, and likeness contract to the university. We do this for two reasons. Number one, to make sure that the student athlete is not entering into what the NCAA would regard as a pay-for-play situation. That is a disaster for both the student athlete and for the institution. The second aspect is to ensure that these name, image, and likeness activities do not interfere with the student athlete's participation in team activities. Okay? We don't want someone saying, well, I can't come to practice today because I have to do an autograph signing or something along those lines. Also, we need to be able to have to discipline students under team rules who do not adhere to these rules. And finally, to the extent that student athletes are using the registered trademarks of the University of Kentucky or the University of Louisville or any of our sister institutions in their efforts to promote name, image, and likeness, they need to get our permission, and we want to make sure that they obtain that permission and that it is done appropriately. So that's what we have in mind in terms of reasonable restrictions. Now, we would also suggest, obviously, that there be a non-discrimination provision. We would also suggest that there be a provision mandating some form of financial literacy. We have young men and women who are barely out of high school, who have an opportunity to make a substantial amount of money relatively quickly. But they might not know things about contracts, about the tax implications of all this. So we at the University of Kentucky, and I know also our counterparts at the University of Louisville, are engaged in that education already. We believe that that would be an important part of any bill. And finally, we are asking that you reaffirm explicitly the immunity of the state university for NIL activities, specifically that there is no formal contract between student athletes and the university related to their grant and aids, so that we're not being sued for a breach of contract action, also insulating us from liability for anything that we may tell a student athlete which might cause the student athlete to be misled in unintentionally, obviously, in some way. And of course, also to ensure that we do not face any lawsuits for any other reason. And then finally, obviously, we want this to become effective immediately, but we recognize that if Congress ever passes a law, then it would be immediately preempted. And Angela and I are happy to answer any questions you might have.
I appreciate so much the information you provided today, and thanks for being here. And this is a topic that just seems like every week just keeps changing in the news. It seems like it's almost like technology. NIL just keeps moving, and NCAA, my personal opinion, should have taken care of this issue many, many years ago. We wouldn't be dealing with this, well, with the Kentucky legislature, what's before us. But at the same time, we also know we're not dealing with 20 years ago. Athletics is different today. Things are moving in a very fast direction, and that's why we're here to look at this issue. I guess one of the questions that I have for you all is, with what you're looking at with draft legislation and where we're going, will this provide a framework for flexibility as it relates to NIL and as it relates to putting, I think, student athletes as a priority, but at the same time protecting institutions? Do we have some safeguards there put in place with that framework of what's being presented?
Yeah, one of the things that the proposed legislation does is it gives institutions the right to decide whether or not they're going to apply reasonable restrictions. So in other words, it doesn't prescribe that they do one or all of the things that Bill has just described. It depends on what's going on in their particular institutions and what their student athletes need. Bill, I don't know if you wanted to add something.
It does provide the flexibility that we need. Also, as I think our counterparts in compliance will tell us shortly, we've already seen things that we never anticipated, and we've had to adapt to that. And I suspect in the months to come, we will continue to see things that we hadn't thought about. And we need the flexibility to say, okay, this is something unusual. We need to come up with a solution that works for us as an institution and that works for our student athletes. And certainly we hope to do that. There is also, I think, the issue of, as I said, these young people are entering into, in some cases, complex financial transactions. This body may wish to make some amendments to strengthen the Uniform Agent Act. Certainly, we would be happy to work with folks in terms of providing any insights on that. But that's not addressed in our draft legislation.
Thank you. And I know in Mr. Harden's comments earlier, in terms of legislation that we've had pre-filed before on the Senate side, I also want to make note, Representative Adam Koenig is also, Representative Adam Bowling has worked on some legislation in the House before on this. So it is timely, and it is something that we're taking very serious as we go forward. We have a few members. Oh, also, does any of the two other members, Matt or Rachel, wish to say any comments?
Yes, thank you very much. As a native Kentuckian, it's very much an honor and privilege for me to be here today. So I do appreciate the opportunity to share some boots on the ground perspective of name, image, likeness. It's been a crazy couple of months in athletic compliance, I think, as my counterpart will attest, as we've tried to navigate the changing waters. And so your question and point about the need to be flexible is very important, because we've had to exercise that through the last couple of months, and we know that more change is coming as well. One of the key principles that I think is also important from the compliance lens that we maintain, whatever legislation we end up with, is that this not be used as recruiting inducements to attend particular institutions. That's something that I think that is a whole piece of this, and that we very much need to make sure that we're protecting. Once the executive order had been rolled out last year, actually a couple of months prior to that, Mr. Barnhart asked me to organize an NIL working group within athletics to help us figure out how to roll this out at Kentucky. And Senator Wise, you mentioned the NCAA. Matt and I had the fortunate, or I don't know, unfortunate, it was fortunate, experience to both work in the national office for several years. And I like to share the perspective that I worked specifically in the amateurism area of the NCAA. And the first working group on name, image, and likeness was formed right before my oldest daughter was born. I very much remember that, because I remember being on maternity leave and participating in committee calls to talk about name, image, likeness. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, she will turn 15 in January. And so this very much has been a long debated issue. What we've seen at Kentucky within the last couple of months of name, image, likeness is we're about right under 500 total transactions that our student athletes have entered into. And so I would also say that the disclosure element of this legislation is very important, because it does help us get an idea of what our student athletes are engaging in and what they're doing. We knew that our revenue generating sports, men's basketball and football, would have a lot of opportunities in this space, and specific student athletes would. What we weren't sure but hopeful for was that the other Olympic sports, and particularly our female student athletes, would have opportunities as well. And I'm very pleased to report that football and men's basketball are the first and second most transactions at Kentucky. But coming in third is our national champion volleyball team with those young ladies, those student athletes. Fourth is one that might surprise you at Kentucky. It's our women's track team. But that's because we have an international TikTok star on our women's track team that has about 500,000 followers. And so she's been able to capitalize through some promotions on social media. And then right behind that, you see several of our other female sports as well. So that just gives you a little bit of perspective. Every sport has had some opportunity. There's been at least one student athlete in every sport that's been able to take advantage of this at Kentucky. Real quick, Bill mentioned educational opportunities. That's really where we've spent a lot of our time, is trying to provide financial literacy resources, helping student athletes understand what exclusivity is in contracts and why that might not be a good thing for them, helping them understand the tax implications, and then building their brand as well. So that's just a little bit from the UK lens, but I know Matt has some perspectives that he would like to share as well.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you, Chair Wise, Chair Huff, and members of the committee for the opportunity to meet with you today. As Rachel has shared, things have evolved very quickly in the college athletics landscape, and to really hit on the last point she made about educating and empowering our student athletes has been our priority at the University of Louisville. We have developed a law clinic that's really driven both by our law school and our business school faculty, because we are dealing with potentially complex licensing issues, intellectual property issues, even the art of negotiating. And we're talking with young adults who are just getting into trying to figure out which degree program they're selecting, and to have this, which is really another educational opportunity in its own right. We too are very excited about the opportunities that have already come in the first 4 months of NIL since July 1, when the executive order came into being. And that's been across over 20 of our sports and similar results. Very enterprising, very interested student athletes who want to figure out how to elevate their brand. We are in a social media driven world. Most of these deals are happening in the social media area of influencing, and some of those opportunities are by those who might not be your star player either. So to the points made earlier about these are very individualized situations and experiences. We are excited at U of L about what's happening in terms of our campus-based resources to help our athletes be successful with NIL.
Matt, also want to let Eastern have a say at the table, please.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the committee. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you today and to provide our perspective, if called upon, from a non-autonomous 5 point of view. To echo the comments that have been made for us, this notion of fairness and being able to make sure that Kentucky student athletes don't fall behind our peers in other states, and then the flexibility to make the decisions that are right for us at our campus and our institution moving forward.
We do have a host of questions for the panel. Representative Massey.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question. I guess as a lawyer, I always hear the word immunity makes my ears pop up because even a lawyer has to eat. But that being said, I have a little bit of concern about the immunity thing. What if there's an intentional tort or an intentional breach of contract, something of that nature? It seems to me that making it so broad as to eliminate any prospect of litigation if someone has been intentionally harmed is problematic.
Representative Massey, thank you for your question. One thing that I think I probably neglected to clarify is the immunity that we are seeking is just a reaffirmation of the immunity for the institutions. Certainly, if a student athlete enters into a contract with a corporation and that corporation breaches the contract, then the student athlete would have the ability to go after the corporation for the breach of contract, and I think it's fair to say that our law school legal clinics at both institutions would probably assist them in doing so. Rather, this has to do with the prospect of the institution itself being sued. Now, as you know, the General Assembly has waived sovereign immunity for claims based upon a written contract. Written contract, I think, is clearly defined as a document that in its four corners or in its four corners in the attachment comprises all terms of the contract, but there is a possibility that a court would take a broader view of a written contract, and we just want to ensure that we the institutions and our individual agents and employees are not being sued by that.
Thank you.
President Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committees, and the representatives from the respective universities. I have no doubt that you all will make sure that you're well protected from any type of litigation and exposure of litigation. But I'd like to ask this group, do y'all have any 17-year-olds that are currently participatory in any of your sports?
We have at least one, yes.
It's not, where I get to, Mr. Chairman, is this is a little bit bigger issue than just the universities, because y'all have more than adept colleges of laws and legal counsels which will be advising us. But when you're starting to think about name, image, and likeness, I'll go to an Anthony Davis or a David Robinson scenario, and what we as a General Assembly need to be aware of is in high school athletics and even younger, and when you all get a juvenile, a minor who is below the age of 18, that may have the ability to have a parent or a guardian sign a contract for them. And through this, I have been sent one that basically tried to create a situation, and I think you're going to see this more with an Anthony Davis who was 6'2" that grew 9 inches, or David Robinson who was similar in the Navy who grew 6 or 7 inches. you're going to start seeing people cast nets out there at the high school level, attempting to get people contracted in hopes that someday, or at a junior college level with an adult, you're going to see people who are going to create contracts and engagements to engagement letters to get these young men and young women in their group, whatever you want to call it, their clients, their book of business, that I heard you all talk about their lack of knowledge of taxes, what that fine language in the bottom of the contract does. And to my brethren in the legal community, we need to think of some void ab initio as against public policy language, not to protect you all, that protect a lot of people that aren't well educated on what could become, and you all will know this, in a quite substantial contracting relationship with large dollars involved. So when you look at this young student, it goes beyond the NCAA, and any thoughts you may have for the Kentucky High School Athletic Association or other institutions that are dealing with, be it youth leagues, promissory, or youth leagues, or entities like that, that where some type of promissory relationship could be made, I would ask you all to think through that process as well. Because I don't want you all getting stuck with a 17-year-old that when they walk into your institution, they've already got a contract that their guardian has signed for them. Then you're all going to have to deal with it. Or somebody's going to have to deal with it.
Thank you, Senator Stivers. Senator West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question. It appears to me that most, if not all, the items that you listed in your presentation, I think are things you can already do as a university within your, you can choose to do those things. What's the need for the legislation to mandate or to set out what's there?
Well, Senator, thank you for your question. We have entered into a new era. I agree with you that we have the authority to do that. I think the executive order, which we are very grateful for, largely confirms that. I think it is helpful for the General Assembly to confirm that, number one, students can earn these things. Number two, that we can impose reasonable conditions. There will be some debate over what reasonable conditions are, and that may someday be a matter for the court. And number three, that we insulate and protect the universities, as we already do, against lawsuits through the form of immunity. So I think you're, in effect, codifying something that I think arguably already exists, but it is necessary, I think, to codify that, particularly with legislators in our sister states enacting various statutes.
Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for recognizing Representative Bowling's efforts. I understand why you all would like to keep the a one standard with the federal government. I just want the panel and the members of this committee to know that a week and a half ago at the National Conference of State Legislatures, we passed a policy stating that we think this is better handled at the states rather than the federal government, and I happen to be the guy that developed that and ran it and got it added. So we just want everybody to know that, and to one point that you all made with regards to federal preemption, I'm not an attorney, but I would be reluctant to put that in there because whatever the federal government does by definition preempts what we're doing, and we may have items in our bill that you like as well as we do that maybe isn't spoken to in the federal and would continue to live on here in Kentucky, because what we do need in Kentucky is probably different than what they need and do in Wyoming, and it's probably different than what they need and do in, say, California. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Timoney?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First, Ms. Baker, I'm very pleased to hear about the direction for our female athletes. You know, we can't turn on any Olympics without hearing that message about fair compensation. And as the loving spouse of a Division I athlete, I understand, you know, how much work that she put in, and with her finish line being college graduation. So I see that a lot of promise here. I think social media definitely is going to benefit. I think there are two sisters at Fresno State that have the most followers. I think that's tremendously positive, and I think that there's a huge upside. That's the part I'm focusing on. I'd also like to thank you for your intentionality on standards and not using this as a recruiting tool, because I think everyone in this room could know there could be a race to the bottom with this type of a thing, and I'm glad that you all have taken that stance and that position. To go along with Representative Koenig's comments a moment ago, any idea if this potentially could move federally?
I don't know if I'm probably not the most appropriate person to comment on that. I'll
Sure.
leave that to our general counsels. But I will say, from an athletic compliance perspective, federal legislation would help us as we send our coaches out to recruit all across the country. The student athletes and their parents are confused because it's so drastically different from state to state, that it would help in the recruiting process if there was a consistent standard in this space.
What we, and certainly defer to our councils on sort of the trajectory of having a federal bill, but I think it's more realistic to be focusing on what the states can do now because it's here. And so that's just sort of a thought that we're 4 months into it, and knowing that the NCAA was actually also walking up to actually legislating this within their own governance structure and didn't do that also, you know, gives you pause in terms of thinking that a federal solution will be around the corner.
Yes, we just add that there is definitely some interest in Congress in a national standard. There seems to be a great deal of disagreement over what that standard would look like, and I'm not sure that anything will be coming anytime in the near future.
Thank you. Representative Massey, his word that signals red flags was immunity. Mine is reasonable. The word reasonable. 300 people, 300 different definitions of reasonable. How did you all come about that phrase and your policy that came along with what you felt was reasonable?
I was going to say, we looked a lot to the executive order as a guide, so it really provides some very common sense exceptions and restrictions. So, you know, anything that would impede the university's copyright or trademark interests, anything that would impede the student athletes' experience as a student first and foremost, anything related to alcohol, tobacco, sex-related, gambling, advertisements. So some of those things, it was pretty low-hanging fruit. We were able to pretty quickly gather consensus as a group. So I think there really wasn't a lot of debate. I can't think of anything that came up that we thought, oh no, that's just far beyond the pale. But to your point, yes, there are going to be things, and there's going to be litigation, and there's going to be things that come from the legislature, and we're open to receiving them.
And I guess that when I saw that word, say I'm a potential Division I athlete who's being, who has scholarship offers to Kentucky universities, is my first phone call after telling my coach that I made it to Representative Massey's law firm, I mean, are we going to have to equip our college athletes with attorneys when they go off? And that's just a concern, because when I see that word, that's what I immediately go towards. So I want to make sure that any type of legislation that we have out, that there's an education piece, that our athletes know exactly what it is, that any typical athlete can walk in and participate, and they won't have to acquire the services of attorneys. And I know that's the direction of college sports. And my next question is, Senator Wise, and actually even this committee, I mean, should we be talking about NIL for high school athletes? I mean, should we be having that conversation about Kentucky High School Athletic Association? Should we be bringing Julian Tackett in here and talking about it? Because we know that there are second graders that are offered college scholarships to participate in sports. And in this state, we have a few of those. But my concern is that obviously we're here at the college level. It's going to be knocking on that next door to come down, and obviously to go along with what President Stiver's point, we have parents who are, going to want to make sure that their kids are taken care of, as they should. But I think that's more of a comment than it is a question. Down the road, are we going to need to do that? And I hope our universities will be there working with us as we kind of navigate through that. But thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Everything we're looking at in terms of going forward with pieces of legislation, we're talking about current, future student athletes. We're not getting into past student athletes. Just want to make sure that is clarified, because there's a lot of people that have said, well, name, image, likeness could come from somebody that made a shot in 1993. And should we be compensating them today for what happened years ago? So I just want to make sure that anything that's being drafted, we are talking about present or future student athletes, not royalties of a past. Any other question? Any other members as we go forward? Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for clearing up a lot of the questions and comments. We look forward as the discussion goes forward on this topic. Thank you all very much. Our last topic on the agenda today is school-based decision-making, SBDM council legislation. Once again, we do not have legislation in front of us to deal with this issue. If you're a member of the Senate Education Committee, this has been a topic that we've addressed, I think, twice before in previous legislative sessions, but we look forward today to hearing again from the bill sponsor, and that's Senator John Schickel. Senator Schickel, welcome back to the Education Committee, and I will let you introduce your guests, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, and I appreciate your patience, both the House and the Senate chairs, on this legislation. We've been working on this, as you know, for a long, long time. This legislation has passed the Senate on three different occasions. We decided to give you all a break last year, and we didn't do it, but we're back again this year. And I think the legislation this year holds even extra urgency, because the eyes of so many parents and so many citizens right now are on our school system with questions around curriculum and other things. I'm not here today to take sides in any of these important issues that face our citizens, because I believe, as my colleagues believe, that these are local issues. The Kentucky Constitution is very clear that the state is responsible for school funding, but curriculum and school issues, we have elected school boards, and it's best that we defer to those people who are elected by the public locally. But if we're going to keep a straight face and say that, we also need to have credibility in our school governance system. And at this time, we really don't have credibility. We send our citizens to the local government, but we have a system set up that is unclear and convoluted with our current school governance system, our school boards, and our site-based council system. I think most of you probably know, but some of you may not, some of the people viewing may not know, that we're the only state in the country set up with site-based councils. And while some think that maybe they have been successful, the data shows really just the opposite. But with what's been going on lately in our state and really our whole country, the school system is responsible to the entire community, and the values of that school system should be reflected by the community. So that is our effort on changing our school governance model in Kentucky. And with that, I would like to turn it over to my guests who have been working on this issue for a long time with me, and they will introduce themselves.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess. Thank you, Senator Wise and Representative Huff, for allowing me to speak today about an issue that has been important for many years and has taken on more importance recently. My name is Devonna Page, and I am a member of the Russell Independent Board of Education, as well as president of the Kentucky School Boards Association. Like you, board members are elected as part-time citizen policymakers. So my other job, I'm a paralegal in a law firm in Bowling Green. I'm here today speaking as a board member, as a graduate of Kentucky's public schools, as the mother of a public school graduate, and like some of you, a former member of a site-based decision-making council. The foundation that our system of common schools is built on is the ownership of every Kentuckian has, and the responsibility we all have to support schools and the important work of educating children. I truly believe that ownership and responsibility makes every Kentuckian a stakeholder in our schools, and stakeholder input is important to the success of all our students. School boards are the most direct and accountable representative of the community when it comes to that ownership and responsibility. A board's mission is to oversee the governance and management of the district. Unfortunately, in key aspects, boards and the superintendents that we hire have been removed from the process of decision-making in our districts. Kentucky statute defines the responsibilities of boards and school councils. This is an area of great confusion to many people, which is why KSBA has created a guide that we have given to each of you here today. Board members often give this guide to our constituents. As you can see, there is a disconnect between SBDM and board roles that breaks the chain of accountability to the community at large. The result can be seen in varying approaches to curriculum and even divergent goals across schools within the same district. It is seen with curriculum plans and sequencing that is not aligned across schools and upgrade levels. It is also seen in the fact that superintendents in nearly all districts in Kentucky do not select the person hired as the principal in that district's schools, despite the fact that the superintendents then serve as the principal's leader and supervisor. This management relationship is not seen in other settings across public or private sector, including educational institutions. These concerns are just some of the reasons why legislation to adjust the balance of decision-making roles among school councils, superintendents, and school boards is so important. I'm not here today to selfishly advocate for more decisions to be made by boards, but instead to advocate for a better process that will strengthen student achievement and foster the connection between schools and our communities. As to the example of principal selection, as a board member who selects the superintendent, evaluates them, and holds them accountable, I believe an important change would be to give the superintendent the responsibility of hiring principals after consulting with SBDM. After all, it is the superintendents who will be leading and evaluating the principals and holding them accountable. It will strengthen the board's evaluation of a superintendent if the board can consider the superintendent's managerial skills through their decisions in selecting the best people to run our schools. As to the example of curriculum planning and alignment, this has become increasingly important in recent years as our students have become more transient in districts across Kentucky. Alignment not only to state standards, but alignment and sequencing across schools and grade levels is something boards and superintendents talk about a lot. Yet, so many of those decisions are not made at the district level. An important change would be to have these decisions made with more collaboration among teachers, principals, district leaders, and parents and students, not less. Continuous school improvement is your goal, and it is the goal of all district leaders. In statute, you recognize that state government, local communities, parents, students, and school employees must work together. and that the cooperation of all involved is necessary to assure that desired outcomes are achieved. I absolutely agree, which is why I'm here today. School boards represent the community, and we answer to the community. Constituents think of boards first and reach out to us the same as they do you, with concerns and expressing views about all sorts of things that happened within our schools. Unfortunately, very often the concerns shared are not within a board's authority to address. In conclusion, I will say that strategic changes to roles of the councils and boards will foster more collaboration and break down the rigid silos boards and councils currently work in. This session presents you with an opportunity to increase the engagement of the entire community with student success. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Sally Sugg, Superintendent, Shelby County Public Schools. That is just one role in education that I've had over a 40-year career. I served as a teacher in 7 through 12. I've served as a principal, and I was elected 3 different times by 3 different councils, elementary and also a high school principal in 3 different districts. I also had the opportunity to serve as Associate Commissioner at the Kentucky Department of Education, and in that role, I mainly was working with our lowest performing schools and districts, many of whom had very dysfunctional leadership practices and site-based councils. So I got to observe that as well. And then I also have a 4-year, I was an elected 4-year school board member in my home county of Henderson County. So I've got a little bit of a perspective from several different viewpoints. I'd like to reiterate a couple of things that Ms. Page talked about first. The ultimate responsibility does fall to the school board and also to the superintendent. They are the ones that get the calls. And I was a teacher prior to SBDM and CARA, and I believe one of the things that was intended is for that SBDM council to serve sort of like a school board where parents would take their concerns to the site-based council at the school. That doesn't happen very often in practice. They usually go straight to the principal, then they go straight to the central office, superintendent, and school board. It is my ultimate responsibility as a superintendent to make sure that those in leadership positions are positioning their schools and ultimately their students to achieve the highest possible degree of success. What I have found over all of those different viewpoints and experiences is that the highest performing districts and the best functioning schools and districts are using a collaborative approach. But we all know that doesn't happen in every district and every school. So one of the things that I would see as a positive is, as Ms. Page talked about, looking at what is working and perhaps making that the standard for all districts and all schools. For instance, in my district, in Shelby County, we have town halls. I have superintendent advisory committees. I have student advisory committees, and we even have 2 students that serve on our school board. I took them to lunch the other day, and I heard some wonderful suggestions. So there's a lot of collaboration in a high-functioning district, and a high-functioning school board welcomes that. A high-functioning superintendent who is a leader that looks to collaborate not only with those that I've mentioned, but also the business community. That's a very, very integral part of a high-functioning district. All of those things help to align what we see K through 12 in public schools or preschool through 12 in public schools. If that collaboration is not there, what we see is independent decisions being made that are a deficit for students that, as Ms. Page mentioned, are very transient, moving from school to school and district to district. And if there isn't a coherent approach that is facilitated, at the very least, by the district office, by the school board and also by the business community, then those students have big gaps in their learning. I recently was able to help with the selection process at Simpsonville Elementary, a very high-functioning elementary. That council did beautifully. As a part of that council, I was able to watch them reach consensus. But the whole time my prayer was, what if? What if they did not reach consensus? How would we manage that process? And so, again, as the Associate Commissioner for School Improvement many years ago, I watched several councils that did come to those kinds of an impasse, and it was not a pretty process. One thing the pandemic has taught all of us is that one size really does not fit all. From COVID to curriculum, one size doesn't work. So looking at what the high-flying districts and very high-functioning, high-performing schools and districts are doing, I think, is a unique opportunity to look again at the balance of SBDM councils, of superintendent leadership, and also of Kentucky school boards. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this topic.
Now, I told you how to turn this on 100 times, and I'm the one that didn't do it. I would just say, as we've talked about this a lot in other interims in several years, but if anything, recently, these topics have come even more to the forefront of public awareness and importance. So thank you again for taking time in the interim in this last meeting to look at this again. And for KSBA, we look forward to working on it during the session.
Thank you. We do have a couple members, some comments or questions. Representative Massey.
Thank you, Chairman Wise. First of all, I want to thank Senator Schickel for bringing this forward. Before I was ever a member of this body, I actually testified on behalf of a bill that he brought previously, so I know he's been working on this for several years. At that time, I was still serving as a board member in Boone County schools, and I will tell you that my experience with site-based councils is mixed. That is, a site-based council often is strong or weak depending on the principal leadership in that school. And of course, there's a makeup that is offset because there's 3 teachers and 2 parents. And so I've had several parents tell me I was a part of a group, but I really never felt like I had to say so. And so we've talked about this at ad nauseum for a long time. I'm not against local decision making. I'm certainly for local control. But I will say that school board members are the truly elected officials in the community. They're on the ballot, and they're responsible to their community for what their school does, whether it succeeds or fails. And they are the ones that are out there doing that. So when you have a problem, when you have some site-based councils that have to beg people to run to be on the council, that's not all cases. But in some, I've been to PTA meetings where they were trying to beg people to run as the parent representatives. Then you get into situations that I personally experienced in my own district back then, where you have something that is at conflict between the site-based council and the truly elected school board members. And that creates a very contentious issue, especially when a superintendent is trying to follow the dictates of the Kentucky Board of Education, but may run awry of directions coming from the site-based council. And so that is a very difficult situation to face. I know Senator Schickel and I had talked about making these an advisory type group, a more balanced group. I don't know, but I do think that now's the right time, given the things we're dealing with, especially with critical race theory taking such a prominent role in our discussions around the nation. And so I think it's time for us to at least have these discussions. And I want to thank both of the presenters here today. I've worked with Eric Kennedy for a long time, actually before I ever, again, took this office. But for Dr. Sugg and for Devana, thank you for being here and giving your comments, because I think that having your leadership coming from the president of KSBA and coming from a very well-respected superintendent, that really brings attention to the fact that we do need some change. There's been some resistance on this because parents felt like they weren't getting a voice. I think there are many ways for parents to get a voice, including school board meetings, where we often gave parents the opportunity to address the entire board in that formal setting. So I want to, again, I say that because as an educator, for 22 years, I was on the school board and had served in the same role that Devana presently serves. I think it's time to address this. This was passed back in 1990 when they talked about getting rid of school boards entirely. They did not do that, thankfully, because I do believe they are truly a necessary component in our educational system. So thank you for bringing this. I'm looking very forward to having this heard in committee and on the floor, and I will work with you in any way that I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bojanowski.
Yes, thank you. I will be brief. One question is, what I'm inferring, and this might be a question for Senator Schickel, are you proposing that curriculum be decided by the school board and principals be selected by the superintendents?
At the end of the day, the superintendent, because he is hired by the school board and answers because he's hired by the school board and the school board answers to the community at large. At the end of the day, both principals and curriculum, after consulting with the site-based council and getting all the possible input, and we all know good leaders always get as much feedback and input and advice as they can, but at the end of the day, if there's a disagreement, those decisions would be made by the superintendent.
Thank you.
Representative Decker.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm really excited that you all got to hear from my superintendent, Sally Sugg. She is a superstar, as you can tell, in every role she plays. I do appreciate, Chairman, for allowing me to ask a question today. I'm really glad that this topic has come up. It's come up among citizens a lot this year. Who is in charge of our schools? Nationwide, I think. And in Kentucky, we do have this odd system with the site-based decision-making councils. I served on a council for 9 years. And I can tell you that there are a lot of issues that we could talk about the site-based councils, one of which came up today about having to beg people to join. I think there are many reasons for that. For parents, I think the biggest reason is because we feel like, speaking as a former, that we really don't have a voice. Unless you have a very strong parent representative, it is as if you're not even there. I had great experience. As you might imagine, I try to have a voice where I go. But I felt like we did wonderful things at our schools with the site-based councils, but I think most parents feel like it is just a token place to sit and rubber stamp what happens. So I think that needs to be looked at. The elections are during school days. You know, someone recently said that they wondered if we could put them on the ballot and be elected there so that people would actually have a place to go vote. One of the things that you mentioned, Senator Schickel, is that you like to think I'm an advocate also for local control of various things. But in education, we've spent lots of time in Kentucky and effort legislatively, etc., trying to ensure that we have equal funding so that everyone can have an equal chance. We want no child to be in a situation where they get a deficient education. One of the reasons I'm co-sponsoring all-day kindergarten is because some counties weren't offering it. I want all children to have the same educational foundation. And so that plays a role in my thinking about control of the schools. All schools need a baseline of education that can get lost locally. So I'm playing in my mind with these things. I like to talk about it. I want to hear more about your thoughts and others. But I do want every child in Kentucky to have the opportunity to have an excellent, world-class education. They're not just going to compete in Kentucky. They're going to compete around the world. So I welcome the thought. I really look forward to revisiting these issues, and I thank you all for your time today. Thank you.
Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chair Wise. Just a couple comments really quickly. Senator Schickel, thank you for bringing this forward. I think in the education world, I think the two things we're hearing most now are voice and choice. I think that's probably parent voice and student choice. I think that, again, to echo some of my counterparts, now is the time to take a look at it. When CARA went into effect, in my opinion, the two most important things that came out of it, first was the SEEK formula to balance, funding across the state, and the second was the creation of SBDM councils. I very fortunately have been able to serve on two different councils in two different capacities. I was a teacher, first before I had tenure, because I heard that they couldn't fire you if you are an SBDM. So I was the first sign up. I was number one. I was number one on the ballot, and I received the most votes. And the second council I served on, I was an administrator in a different capacity. The first SBDM council, we had usually any number of 30 to 50 parents that would sign up to run in that election. The second site-based council I was on a different school. We had to extend our deadlines. We had to literally pitch the importance to people who would walk into the building. I've been on site-based councils that were rubber stamp committees, where all the work had been done ahead of time, and they bring it to us, and we just stamp it and move it along. And I've been in other committees where I've been on other site-based councils where 3 hours in we had to adjourn because we were all exhausted and no one really knew what we were talking about at that point. So there is such diversity there. The Kentucky Education Reform Act, any good reform continues to reform itself. We're 31 years in. It's definitely time to take a look at it. I definitely want to see how the teacher voice plays into this. I think that we definitely need to make sure that we're including that in some capacity. Hiring principals was the big deal. If you're on SBDM, we had some people that just wanted to show up and get their name on a ballot, and then when all of a sudden the principal decided they were going to retire in December, then I'm off of here. I'm resigning my position on SBDM. Put somebody else on there, and then other people would want to get on. So obviously that's a very, very important piece. At the district level, I do see it now. The angle from the superintendent's perspective, I definitely see that. I do think it's time we take a look at it. I would definitely want to see how this is going to be boiled down into specifics, and I'd want to make sure that the core values that we established in CARA in 1990 are still adhered to with this moving forward. But I think it's definitely time for change. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last question on this topic is coming from Senator Thomas. We are approaching the 1 o'clock hour. LRC's got a training. We got some other members moving to committee. So Senator Thomas, you get the final say.
Max, thank you. And I hope you got my information. I was listening to you by Zoom. I've had a slew of meetings here this morning. I guess here's my question. I'll get right to the point. As we've seen recently in the election in Virginia, parents want a say-so and control over how their children are being educated. The number one polling issue out of that race in Virginia was that parents wanted to have a say in their education. That was the difference in the victory in that case. Given that, I don't understand why we continue to see school councils under attack. My position has always been and remains to be that what we should be doing with regard to school councils is equalizing the number between parents and teachers. We ought to be giving parents a larger voice in school councils and not a smaller voice. Again, I hate I've been asked, I have not been asked, I've been listening, but I hate I haven't been here. But I did feel compelled to come here and get your response in terms of what we saw in the Virginia election and my approach to where we should go with school councils.
Well, I assume that question's for me, Senator.
Well, John, you're one of my favorite guys.
I know that.
You know that.
And you're one of my...
So yes, I always want to hear from you.
You're one of my favorites also, so it's good to see you and good to hear from you. My response to that, the specific situation you talk about in Virginia, is parents are on school boards. In Boone County, we have a school board. Every one of them's a parent. And I think that you take the message from Virginia a little bit too narrowly. Yes, parents do want to have a say, but the public in general wants to have a say because we all pay for schools, as we should. It's outlined in the Kentucky Constitution. But parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, we all want to have a say. That's how I would answer that. And that's best through the elected school board.
Could I comment as well? Senator Thomas, I just wanted to say that I didn't mean to infer from my statement that I wanted to cut parents out of the process, which is exactly the opposite. I want to make sure that there is more collaboration and that they do have a strong voice in this. So my intention is not to cut them out.
I did feel that Senator Givens did have a comment to make briefly.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Senator Schickel, thanks for bringing the legislation. You and I have talked multiple times over the years about this legislation. And as you indicated, it's made it through the Senate 3 times, I believe. Is that correct? The timing couldn't be better. Your focus is spot on, and I'm excited to be supportive of it once again. And I think it stands a better chance this year than before. And on the topic, and this is something I remind myself of, so when I say it, it's not a message to anyone in the body here. Issues have timing. We were fortunate years ago, through the leadership of Senator West, to pass some tribunal language that we had tried at least 6 sessions to get passed. The timing was right. The message was right. Senator West guided that through the process very skillfully, made changes as he had to make them to achieve the ultimate goal, and was successful. And I feel confident we can do the same with this legislation. So thank you, Senator.
Thank you all. Any other comments, any other questions? Seeing none, we were out of here right at the time we needed to be. Thank you all so much for today's meeting. Thanks for the testimony. Motion for adjournment. So moved. Thank you.